Thank you so much, Madam Lieutenant Governor, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. It's an honor to be standing here today with all these leaders on reproductive freedom and reproductive health care. On a day we should be celebrating 51 years of a federal, constitutional, fundamental right to decide when or whether to be pregnant. Just 18 months ago, despite 50 years of precedent, almost 50 years of precedent, despite almost 50 years of people across this country, especially women, depending on that right to organize their lives and make fundamental decisions about their futures, the United States Supreme Court undemocratically and radically stripped away that right through the Dobbs decision. And in the 18 months that have followed, the harm that has been visited as a result of abortion restrictions, extreme abortion restrictions across this country in states that have those restrictions, has been limited only by the cruelty of the imaginations of politicians and prosecutors in those states. And you've heard about some of those terrifying and demoralizing stories about the harm that's been visited on families, on women, both psychologically and physically, through the deprivation of medical care that is needed and deserved, and the deprivation of the ability to make those fundamental decisions about one's life and how or whether to have a family. Here in Connecticut, we've taken the opposite approach. Through a whole-of-government response, thanks to the governor, lieutenant governor, all our constitutional officers, and the roughly 50-member-strong Reproductive Rights Caucus, we have passed nation-leading legislation, including the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act in 2022, to protect providers and individuals in our state and to ensure that every person has access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care here in our state. And I'll just note that the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act in particular, which we were the first to pass, has now been enacted by 17 states and the District of Columbia. And so Connecticut, I think, very rightfully is proud of its leadership on reproductive freedom and access to reproductive health care. But we have more work to do, more work to ensure that every person in our state can access every element of reproductive health care, whether they want to have a child or don't, where they live in any part of the state, regardless of their economic circumstances. And we're going to be continuing that fight in the legislature that session through the Reproductive Rights Caucus. And I want to echo one more thing that the comptroller said. It is an election year, and we have an extraordinarily strong coalition here in the state of Connecticut, building on the progress that we've made to ensure that everyone has that access here in the state of Connecticut and their rights are protected. But if there is a federal abortion ban, that almost doesn't matter. And so every person, in addition to every legislator and every elected official, needs to be talking about this issue because it is a fundamental choice election, and every person at every level of government who has a position of power needs to be able to answer about whether they're going to be protecting those rights and making it a priority. Here in the state of Connecticut, we definitely will, and we're going to continue to fight through the legislature, but we also need to fight to ensure that every person in our state and across the country understands the stakes of this issue and the stakes of having their voice heard in the upcoming election. Thank you.